His name was Frank, 67 years old, ex-military, quiet, tough, the kind of man who showed up to every appointment on time but never said more than he had to. When I first met him, it was in the ER. He had just suffered a mild stroke. Luckily, no major damage. A bit of slurred speech, some weakness in the left hand. He would recover. After we stabilized him, I sat by his bed with his chart in hand. "Frank," I said, "did anyone ever tell you your cholesterol was high?" He gave a shrug. "Yeah, once or twice. I figured it wasn't a big deal. I mean, I don't feel anything." That sentence, "I don't feel anything," I've heard it more times than I can count. And it's what makes cholesterol so dangerous. Frank wasn't reckless. He wasn't lazy. He was just like millions of people walking around today, normal, functional, unaware that something silent had been building inside his arteries for years. He didn't smoke. He wasn't overweight. But his LDL cholesterol was sky high, and he didn't know what that meant. No one had ever explained it in a way that mattered. In fact, during that first conversation, he told me he thought cholesterol was mostly a diet thing. Then he asked me this: "If it's just a number on a blood test, how could it do this to my brain?" That's what this episode is about. Because I believe that when patients understand what those numbers really mean, they don't just fear stroke, they start preventing it. Your cholesterol panel isn't just ink on paper. It's a map of what's happening inside your blood vessels. And if you know how to read it, you can change where you're headed. Today, I'm going to walk you through what each cholesterol number means, how it contributes to stroke, what numbers to watch, and what to do if they're heading in the wrong direction. You don't have to become a biochemist, but you do need to become the expert on your own body. Because stroke doesn't always give you a warning, but your cholesterol does if you know where to look. And if this episode helps make something clearer for you or someone you care about, do me a favor. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. That simple action helps us reach more people with life-saving information just like this. Now let's get into it. Let's get something straight from the start. Cholesterol itself isn't evil. In fact, your body needs cholesterol to build hormones, stabilize cell membranes, and support brain function. The problem isn't that we have cholesterol. It's where it ends up and in what form. Think of cholesterol like traffic. You need cars on the road for a city to function. But if too many pile up in the wrong places, or if trucks break down and block lanes, you get gridlock, accidents, damage. That's what happens inside your blood vessels when cholesterol goes unchecked. Let's break it down. When you get a cholesterol test called a lipid panel, you typically see these numbers: total cholesterol, LDL, low-density lipoprotein, the bad cholesterol; HDL, high-density lipoprotein, the good cholesterol; triglycerides. LDL is the main culprit we worry about when it comes to stroke. Here's why. LDL particles carry cholesterol through your bloodstream. When there's too much of it, or when those particles become small and dense, they can slip into the lining of your arteries, triggering inflammation. Over time, this causes plaque buildup, called atherosclerosis. Now imagine those plaques forming in the carotid arteries, the main highways delivering blood to your brain. As plaque grows, it narrows the passageway, like a clog forming in a pipe. One day, that plaque might rupture. Your body tries to patch it with a clot, and if that clot breaks loose and travels upstream, you've got a stroke. That's not theory. That's textbook stroke physiology, and I've seen it play out over and over. On the other hand, HDL is like the cleanup crew. It helps carry excess cholesterol away from the arteries and back to the liver, where it can be processed and removed. So, a higher HDL is generally protective. Triglycerides are another type of fat in your blood. They're influenced by sugar, alcohol, and refined carbs. High triglycerides contribute to blood thickness and can accelerate plaque formation, especially when combined with high LDL and low HDL. Here's the tough part. You can have dangerous cholesterol numbers and feel completely fine. No pain, no dizziness, no symptoms. That's why I call it vascular rust. You don't see it until something breaks. That's also why it's so important to know your numbers and to know what's normal. Here's a general target I give my patients, though goals vary person to person. LDL cholesterol, under 100 milligram. DL, under 70 if you've already had a stroke or heart disease. HDL cholesterol, over 50 for women, over 40 for men. Triglycerides, under 150 mg, DL. Total cholesterol, ideally under 200 milligrams, DL. But it's not just about hitting the right number. It's about what those numbers represent: your vessel health, your stroke risk, and your long-term brain protection. I tell my patients, every point you bring your LDL down, you're clearing the path for blood to your brain. And every point you raise HDL, you're adding another layer of protection. So if you've been told your cholesterol is a bit high, but no one explained what that means, this is your moment to start paying attention. Because that bit high number might be the only warning you get before something serious happens. In the next section, I'll tell you about a patient who learned that lesson the hard way and how it changed everything about how he approached his health. His name was Michael, and he was 58 when I first met him. He'd come in for a routine checkup, no symptoms, no complaints, just doing it because his wife made him. He had a bit of a belly, but nothing alarming. Blood pressure? Slightly elevated. Cholesterol? High LDL at 172, HDL at 35, triglycerides over 200. Not terrible, but not great. I sat down with him, showed him the numbers, and told him, "You're on a dangerous path. These levels put you at real risk for a stroke." He blinked. "But I feel fine. I run around with the grandkids. I walk every day." I nodded. "That's great. But feeling fine doesn't mean your arteries are fine." He promised to cut back on red meat, maybe eat more fruit. He wasn't big on pills, so he didn't start the statin I recommended. "I want to try it the natural way first," he said. 3 months later, I got a page from the ER. Michael had collapsed while carrying groceries up the stairs. Sudden loss of vision, slurred speech, left-sided weakness. By the time I saw him in the hospital, the clot had already done its damage. He was lucky to be alive, but not without consequences. He couldn't write his name or hold a fork without shaking. His wife was sitting beside him, tears in her eyes. "He told me you warned him," she whispered. I sat there quietly for a moment. I thought about that checkup, the conversation, the numbers, and I realized something. It's not just that people don't take cholesterol seriously, it's that we, as doctors, often don't explain it in a way that feels serious. Numbers on paper don't scare people. Symptoms do. Pain does. But cholesterol? It's silent. And that silence lulls people into believing they're safe. After Michael stabilized, he looked at me and said, "I should have listened, but I didn't think it was real. Not for me." That moment, his regret, his honesty, changed how I talked to every patient after that. I no longer just report numbers. I tell stories. I explain the why. I make it personal. Because when something is personal, it becomes real. Michael eventually regained enough strength to walk short distances. He started medication, changed his diet, tracked his numbers, but the damage was done. And if sharing his story today makes even one person act before the stroke hits, then it wasn't in vain. When my patients bring in their blood test results, I always start with the same question. Do you know what these numbers actually mean? Most of the time, the answer is no. And it's not because they don't care, it's because no one ever explained it to them in a way that makes sense. They're handed a printout with red flags and abbreviations, but no one sits down to say, here's what's going on inside your body. That's what I want to do now. I want to give you the map and help you learn how to read it. Because your cholesterol numbers aren't just numbers, they're clues. And when you understand them, you can take control. Let's start with total cholesterol. This number is a general overview. It combines your LDL, HDL, and a portion of your triglycerides. Ideally, we want it under 200. But by itself, total cholesterol doesn't tell us much. You could have a normal total and still have dangerously high LDL. That's why we always dig deeper, because it's what's inside the total that matters most. LDL, low-density lipoprotein, is what we often call bad cholesterol. I don't like calling it bad, because it has a job. But when there's too much of it, or when it's the small, dense type, it starts to stick to the walls of your arteries. Over time, that sticky buildup causes inflammation. It forms plaque. And if that plaque ruptures, it can block blood flow and cause a stroke. For most people, we aim for an LDL under 100. But if you've already had a stroke or heart attack, we want it under 70. Because every point lower is a step further from danger. HDL is the opposite. It's your cleanup crew, high-density lipoprotein. Think of HDL like a garbage truck that drives through your arteries, picking up extra cholesterol and carrying it back to the liver. That's why we call it good cholesterol. Higher HDL helps lower your risk of stroke and heart disease. For men, we want HDL over 40. For women, over 50. You can raise it with exercise, healthy fats, and quitting smoking. And when HDL goes up, it's like sending more trucks to clean up the road. Then we have triglycerides. These are another type of fat in your blood, often driven by sugar, alcohol, and refined carbs. High triglycerides thicken your blood and increase inflammation. That makes it easier for clots to form. We want this number under 150, and you can lower it by cutting sugary drinks, reducing alcohol, and eating more fiber. Most people don't even know what triglycerides are, but they matter, especially when combined with high LDL and low HDL. Some labs also give you cholesterol ratios, like total cholesterol divided by HDL. These ratios help us understand balance. If your total looks okay, but your HDL is low, the ratio could still be dangerous. We usually aim for a ratio under 4. Ratios don't replace the main numbers, but they add context. They help us see the big picture, and sometimes they're the first red flag that something's off. So how does all this relate to stroke? It's simple. When LDL is high and inflammation builds up, plaque forms inside your arteries, especially in the ones leading to your brain. That plaque can rupture. Your body tries to heal the rupture with a clot, but if that clot travels to the brain and blocks blood flow, it causes an ischemic stroke. That's the most common type of stroke, and high cholesterol is one of the biggest drivers behind it. Here's the frustrating part. Most people don't feel any of this happening. There's no pain, no warning. You can have perfect energy and still have cholesterol slowly damaging your arteries every day. That's why I call it vascular rust. You don't see it until something breaks. But the good news is, it's not permanent, and it's not hopeless, because cholesterol can be lowered. So what do we do if the numbers are high? First, we look at lifestyle. Diet changes alone can reduce LDL by 10 to 20%. Eating more fiber, less saturated fat, moving more, losing weight even 5 or 10 pounds can help. Cutting sugar, swapping fried foods for baked, walking 30 minutes a day, it all adds up. I've seen people drop 50 points off their LDL just by changing what they eat and how they move. Sometimes, though, Lifestyle isn't enough, especially if you've had a stroke before. That's when we talk about medication. Statins are the most common. They lower LDL, stabilize plaque, and reduce inflammation. There are other options, too: ezetimibe, PCSK9 inhibitors, and newer oral meds. These aren't a sign of failure. They're tools. Just like crutches help you walk after an injury, these medications help your arteries recover. What matters most is that you know your numbers. Ask your doctor to explain them. Write them down. Track them over time. Because even a few points in the right direction could mean the difference between a second stroke and a second chance. Over the years, I've noticed that most patients don't ignore their health because they don't care. They ignore it because they feel overwhelmed. Cholesterol is one of those topics that sounds technical, so people shut down before they even begin. But stroke survivors, or those trying to avoid a second one, need clarity, not confusion. And unfortunately, I see the same mistakes repeat themselves again and again. Mistakes that could have been prevented. Let me walk you through 5 of the most common ones. Mistake number 1: waiting for symptoms. The number one misconception I hear is, if something was wrong, I'd feel it. But cholesterol doesn't work that way. It builds up quietly, slowly, invisibly. There's no chest pain, no numbness, no warning signs until the artery is blocked and the damage is done. I tell my patients, if you're waiting for a sign, the stroke will be it. Mistake number 2: trusting normal totals without context. Some patients feel reassured when their total cholesterol is under 200, but that number doesn't tell the full story. If your HDL is low and LDL is borderline high, you're still at risk. I've seen stroke patients with normal totals, but terrible ratios. Always look beyond the headline number. Ask about LDL, HDL, triglycerides, and your personal risk factors. Mistake number 3: relying on diet alone too late. Lifestyle changes are powerful, but sometimes they're not enough, especially after a stroke. I've had patients say, I'll just eat better, while refusing medication their body actually needs. The damage inside your arteries isn't always reversible with food alone. If your numbers are high and your risk is elevated, you need a combined plan. Diet is the foundation, but medication is sometimes the scaffold that holds the structure up. Mistake number 4: falling into the all-or-nothing trap. I've seen people try to overhaul their entire life in 1 week, cutting all fat, joining a gym, tossing out everything in the pantry, and by week 2, they're burned out. Real change is built on small, sustainable steps. Replace one bad habit at a time. Track progress monthly. Don't let one bad meal make you feel like a failure. It's not about perfection, it's about momentum. Mistake number 5: thinking cholesterol is only about food. Cholesterol is influenced by more than diet. Genetics play a huge role. Stress, sleep, weight, and hormones matter too. I've seen healthy eaters with sky-high LDL because of family history. That's why everyone, regardless of how clean they eat, should get their numbers checked. Once you know your baseline, you can decide the best strategy with your doctor. Recovery after a stroke is about more than physical therapy. It's about rebuilding trust in your body and in your choices. I've had patients come to me weeks after a stroke, still shaken, asking, "What now?" And the first place I start, beyond rehab or mobility, is with the numbers, especially cholesterol. Because recovery isn't just about what you regain. It's about what you prevent from happening again. One of my patients, Gloria, had a small stroke at 64. She recovered her speech quickly, and within a month, she was walking on her own again. But what made the biggest difference long-term wasn't her movement. It was her mindset. She said, "I got a second chance, and I'm not wasting it." She tracked her cholesterol every 3 months. She met with a dietitian. She took her statin, even though she didn't like taking pills. And 3 years later, she's still stroke-free. I've also seen the opposite. A patient named Ben had a mild stroke, skipped his follow-ups, and said he'd try to eat healthier. But he didn't want to change much. He avoided medication. He didn't take his cholesterol seriously. 9 months later, he was back in the ER this time with a major stroke that left him unable to speak. That second stroke wasn't just harder, it was avoidable. That's what makes cholesterol management part of recovery. Because every point you lower your LDL, every positive change you make to your diet or medication, buys you time, buys you clarity, buys you strength. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be consistent. Stroke recovery is fragile, but your choices can make it stronger. I tell every patient after discharge, this isn't the end of something, it's the beginning of a new relationship with your health, a new way of seeing food, numbers, and routines. You're not just recovering from a stroke, you're rebuilding protection for your brain, one day, one meal, one choice at a time. If you've made it this far, let me say this clearly. You're not powerless. Stroke may seem like a sudden event, but behind every sudden stroke are months or years of small warnings. And cholesterol? It's one of the loudest, clearest warnings we get. The tragedy is that too many people ignore it. But not you. You're here. You're listening. And that means you still have time to act. Knowing your numbers is the first step. But don't stop there. Call your doctor. Ask for a lipid panel if you haven't had one recently. Review your results, write them down, track them over time. And if your numbers are too high, don't wait for a second warning. Make a plan today with your doctor, your diet, and your daily habits. You don't have to change everything overnight. Just take one step. Maybe it's switching to olive oil. Maybe it's saying yes to that statin you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a walk after dinner instead of more screen time. These small actions, repeated daily, build protection you can't see, but your brain will feel the difference. And don't go it alone. Involve your family. Share this video. Let your loved ones know what you're working on. You'd be surprised how many lives you can influence just by leading the way. Cholesterol may be invisible, but its effects are not, and neither is your power to change them. So if this episode helped you understand your health a little better, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone you care about. We're building a community here, one that believes knowledge saves lives. Because it does. And I'll be right here, every week, walking this road with you. See you in the next episode.